Well, can you believe it? Heartsfire 4 by Blood Alone has been announced, which I think many people have long been waiting for. There's a few things I kind of just wanted to talk about in a very short video, not quite a dev diary, but when, something as big as this comes out, you kind of have to talk about it. So the trailer itself obviously looks so cool. You can see the airplane designer on the side, you can see the guns and the prelude to war. The soundtrack is really good. It kind of reminds me of The City Must Survive from the Frostpunk soundtrack. Very dramatic and very suspenseful for what's to come. So to cover, we have 2 to 3 things that we're going to look at. We're going to look at the initial announcement, and then we're going to look at the Steam page, which has some information and some images to go over. So without further ado, in By Blood Alone, you're going to be playing as one of 3 nations. Those 3 nations are going to be Italy, Ethiopia, and Switzerland. Now, I think Italy is by and large the most requested one that they could have done. I think there was teasing towards there being South America, but that was probably a bait and switch or a false flag to kind of trick you, lull you into a false direction, which is why I never explicitly stated it as I thought that was going to be it. I just stuck it at the end. So I'm pretty happy that Italy is the choice. I am surprised by Ethiopia. I really didn't think they'd commit to adding mechanics to a nation that's defeated in 1936, but there is, and it's going to have big decisions, including post-defeat playing as a country, as a government in exile. So very unique stuff there, very new. And Switzerland, with what they describe as the true meaning of building tall. So is this going to be a country that puts the Netherlands to shame? Because as it stands right now in my head, the Netherlands is like the go-to mega build tall, hunker down, stand until the very end country. In addition to that, we're going to see some changes to the air warfare system, which we kind of all saw coming after the previous air rework designer, including new plane models, apparently new functionality for owners of La Resistance and the Intel system, and whether that's included with scout planes being the intention there, I guess we'll find out, as well as tons of other things like Italian planes and all these different models, which I assume are going to be encompassing within previous DLCs, where they came with plane models too, so very cool. Next up, we have the first thing they announced, and it kind of gives much more details here. You'll be able to use new peace conference features. So we did see how peace conference is being reworked in terms of you ask for states, and you sort of use your justified claims to negotiate getting them in kind of a more worked out system, as opposed to the top 2 players passing points. Now there's tons of other options, because before we just basically had annexing, puppeting, or leaving. Now you can demand the demilitarization of states, dismantle military industry and defeated foes, get war reparations, which is a very EU4 feeling thing, have access to resource rights in the regions where you've gone to war for, and some other things that they don't explicitly say. The final thing they talk about in this section is that navies, which are another thing they've reworked in their talking dev diaries, is now you can ask for them and try and get as much of the navy as something else to divide in a peace settlement. I'm very interested to see how they're going to go about making this peace conference rework work, because as it stands right now, a lot of wars in the game are very settled early on. You do your Austria-Hungary war, you do maybe another small war, but then that's it. You are like total war on nothing at all. It's very much like the 1943 Casablanca Conference. You will get total capitulation from one side or the other. So I do wonder if there's going to be some kind of ability to utilize these peace conference decisions earlier for certain nations, or if they're going to be exclusively kind of used in the majority of times for after the defeat of the Axis, or after the defeat of the Allies, or after the defeat of the Comintern. I guess we'll find out how that's going to work, but I do think they're very cool additions. Some other things they talk about are division commanders will now be the bread and butter of your future officer candidates. So that's going to be something they haven't quite talked about, but they do mention having country-unique medals that you can give to your commanders. So I guess this is something in addition to like leveling them with traits. You can now manually give them things to make them better and see them progress as like characters. It kind of reminds me of CK3, where you have characters and you kind of, even though they're unique, you are pushing them along in certain directions. And finally, we find out there's going to be more radio integrated music, as we heard at the end of the trailer. New diplomatic actions, which again, is this to do with the peace conference? We can hope, we can pray. And new models and sound effects. So all looking very good. So right now you can go over to Steam and actually see the expansion By Blood Alone and get your wishlist going for it if you so choose to, and prepare for whenever it is ready to pre-order or buy it or whatever you want to do. But wishlisting you can do right now, which is good because it tells us about the DLC in the description. So their initial description of the content is pretty standard, although I will say that with Italy, they're making some strong preludes to new alternate history options, which makes me wonder if they're really pushing the potential of changing history here, or whether this is just another, you can form Rome, you can go communist, kind of the standard stuff, or whether it's really going to feel like shifting the entire game in a different direction. It would be interesting to see a world where Mussolini is the figurehead of World War II's Axis. He's the one really pioneering everything in a direction from 1936. That could be a very interesting shift from the current form of Hoi 4. Some of the things they do talk about is the historical path of Mussolini's Italy, restoring power to a monarchy, the communist revolution, or promoting democracy. So the standard stuff we can all expect. Moving on, we see the Ethiopia focus tree, which, goodness knows how that one's going to work. Probably banned in multiplayer, I'm not going to deny. Next up, we have the new Swiss focus tree. So it's really going to be, there's no easy nations to defeat other than Austria next to you. So definitely going to be one of those slowly building up from the inside kind of countries. New peace conference options, which we already talked about with all the new ways you can interact with peace conferences. And at the bottom, we see embargo interaction, so we do have some information about the new diplomatic options. They didn't mention it in the announcements, but they do mention it here, and that's why we have to both look at the dev diary and the Steam page. There's information on both sides. So now you can embargo people, so you can stop them from taking your resources if they've generated enough world tension. My thought process is, I wonder if this is very specifically tied to puppets, because, for example, if you're playing as Britain, British Malaya, and a few other places, South Africa, Canada, there's plenty of places that have tons of resources. If you embargo somebody, does your puppet inherit the embargo? Because ensuring that British Malaya isn't giving away stuff is pretty important for the the build, considering that is the central resource hub of the British Empire. And the final thing we're going to look at are the images on the Steam front workshop. So we do get 5 images to look at, which are spoiling things. It says under development in bottom right, so take everything with a grain of salt. But here we can see the plane designer in, I suppose, its early form. Very similar to the stuff we've seen with the tank designer and the navy designer for ships. This isn't important, but it is funny to mention. If you look in the top right, you'll see that it's 1936. January 1st, and we seem to have 500 XP in pretty much everything. Surely this is an authentic screenshot taken for the in a game and not just made for the Steam front page. Surely, right? Next up, we have possibly the most important image we can see going, which is another image of the Peace Deal conference system. So if we break down as much as we can here, we're looking at the Treaty of Oslo, which seems to be the post-World War II conference as far as I can detect. Soviets are here and the Allies are here. And on the left, we see something called bid actions. There are 5 of them there, so I think there's take state, change government, make puppet. I'm not sure what the other 2 are, but the ship I'm going to assume is take the navy. So those are the 5 bid actions I can currently see on the side. On the left, we see all of the traditional states that you can take for different amounts of war score. So that's pretty much the same, although there is a transfer icon on the right, probably suggesting things you're pushing into your current demands, which is on the right-hand side of the screen, and you're picking between pushing them over or pulling them back. In the middle of the screen, we see a little window for the contested bid, which is the current things that are multiple people are going for, which appears to be changing governments in a few places. If we look in the center of the screen, we see that the 4 flags for the change government for 204 is right in the middle of Prague. So I assume the Soviets, the British, I can't even tell what flag that is. I'm a fool. Is that Iran? Okay, I'm an idiot, ignore me. But that and America are all trying to change the government for the Czech Republic, or Czechoslovakia for its time. The point being that now it's no longer first come, first serve, I want to puppet this country, screw you all. It's 2 people can both want to puppet it, and the winning bid will get to puppet it in the end. And moving on to the right-hand side, we see the current demands, and at the top right, I have noticed there's a victors and beneficiaries. So there are people who win the war, but does that also mean there are people who are going to be given stuff, even if they weren't necessarily fully contributing? Like they may be sent attaches. Do they get something? Or I'm unsure as to how the beneficiaries is going to work, but we do see the Soviet Union's central demands and all the things they're trying to do, including changing governments, which they can see is contested by the red stripy lines, and all of the states they're hoping to take. One thing that is highlighted, because the cursor's over it, is Italy gives some of their navy to the Soviet Union. You can see it has a specific peace action cost because of the capital ship's value, which I assume is taken from its construction value, which is transferred into a peace conference value, and then you can take the navy, which also generates world tension, which is somewhat surprising to me. I couldn't imagine me taking a few submarines is going to cause the entire world to freak out. Oh my god, the world is ending. But hey, maybe some people are very worried that you're taking just too many ships. So maybe something to be worried about. And finally, on the bottom right, we can see some of the other countries in the peace deal. Luxembourg, Belgium, Netherlands, Liberia. And I assume it's from here that you can possibly transfer some of your claims and give them to somebody else. So I'm thinking when you would want to give land from somebody you've conquered to one of your puppets, you could perhaps drag one of your claims down into that section. As I say, it's all very uncertain as to how the mechanics are going to work, but these are just some ideas of how it could work from what I'm seeing. Okay, next up we see a battle going on for the Isle of Sicily, with tons of ships coming in from every corner, although those are weird looking ships. Are they like landing ships, I assume? Those are some interesting models. But we do get to see the models of the individual units, which is all looking pretty good. I like this guy with the red top over here. The fourth image is, again, just showing some more units. We get to see those nice quality images. This guy has no HUD at all. He's going head first in, as well as one of the different planes you could get. And I think that's a new model. I don't recognize that model. It's kind of got like a leopard print on it or something. Pretty good. And so for our final image, we get a sneak look into Ethiopia with all the power they're going to have. Again, under development, because there is something kind of odd going on here. So the elephant in the room, Haile Selassie, has a ridiculous amount of traits. Ridiculous. Also, 2 of his traits are both titled by the conquering lion of the title of Judea, His Imperial Majesty Haile Selassie I, King of Kings, Land of Lords, Lord of Lords, Elect of God. Yeah, maybe that's a bit too many. They've duplicated the trait there. But even still, very strong on the buffs. As an aside, we can also have if you look to the bottom left, their recruitable law has got its own custom icon. So I'm kind of interested to know what recruitable law they have, because that's entirely new. That's a new recruitable law. That could be anything. I have no idea what that could be. I'm sure there is some historical background I could look into, and that will probably tell you why the recruitable law at the time has this unique option. Next up is national spirits, and some of the icons look the same, but if you look at the end, those 3 are very proud, bright coloured icons, so looking cool, but not quite sure what they're going to do. Of course, there is this new menu we're looking at called Balance of Power. I'm unsure if that's how it's going to look in the final version, but maybe. And again, since we're not quite sure on how the Ethiopia mechanic's going to work, it's uncertain. This isn't something to do with them being a government in exile, I don't think, because the country is very clearly on the screen. So maybe some unique thing for Ethiopia? It's entirely unsure, but the balance of power seems to be teetering backwards, and there's a couple of decisions Ethiopia can do to increase the Mesafist privileges and the power of the Mekwaniint. God, I'm so terrible with pronunciation. In short, I can only assume this is some sort of internal battle within Ethiopia where the control of Haile Selassie isn't quite secured over all the different regions he controls, so he's trying to solidify himself as the single ruler. It's also worth noting that not only has he conquered the Italian territories, Somalia, Eritrea, he's also got French Djibouti, and he's got Yemen, forming the Empire of Zion. It is April 1936, so I don't think this is necessarily a vanilla version of the game, but it is interesting to note there may be some options for Ethiopia to expand into the Middle East and go conquering that way. In addition, it's kind of hard to tell, so I could be wrong about this, but if we look slightly closer on the Empire of Zion, I think I can see some lines indicating some new states. So Ethiopia is going to be split into possibly 3 or 4 states? It's kind of hard to follow these lines because it's also lost in the mountainous region. But one could assume that if they did it with Latvia, they're going to do it with Ethiopia, and it won't be just one big state, but divided into many. And so that, I think, is that. So tell me what you think. I'm pretty excited to find out what this is going to be like. Very interested in the peace conference changes and if there are going to be any other interesting new diplomatic options. What will the formable nations be? How will they handle Rome? You know, Italy having Rome as its formable nation, Emperor Mussolini with his little laurel wreath crown. I wonder how that's going to be reworked. So many questions, but where are the answers? I guess we'll have to wait and see. If I had to say my only disappointment, and it's only a minor disappointment, is I felt if there was ever the opportunity to do Austria and Albania, it was going to be now. So now I'm like, if they haven't done it now, I'm uncertain if they're ever going to do it. So never mind, I suppose, but we can't complain if we're getting Italy. So thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this little look into what's coming up, feel free to like, feel free to subscribe, and I will definitely be seeing you all soon. Bye.